Hello to everyone. Planning to move to the US or Canada in 2026 can feel overwhelming with changing rules, unclear pathways, and a lot of conflicting advice. In this conversation, we are breaking down what actually works today, from legal pathways to job market realities, so you can make the right decision. I am Gagan Mundra, barrister and solicitor at Visa Serve Immigration Law PC, joined by David Nachman, managing partner of NPZ Law Group, and Leona Wilson, president of Armillary Business Group, to give you a complete, honest picture of what it really takes to move abroad. We'll start our conversation with what has fundamentally changed about immigration in last couple of years. I would say putting 2 years behind is a very short picture. Immigration has been changing constantly over the years. It's coming up with new faces, new challenges, and new regulations. I'll just start with Bill C3, what we just got introduced in Canada, which is also called Strengthening Canada's Immigration System and Borders Act. It has not only impacted how the asylum applications would look like, it has also impacted how IRCC is now going to share the information regarding immigration applications with the provinces and territories. I'll start with David. Tell us what are your views, how you think how immigration has unfolded in past few years, or how the journey has been from the time that you've probably been practicing to the present.
Thank you so much, Gagan. And it's always a pleasure to join you ladies for this discussion. And I think today, actually, it's an excellent question and quite timely because everyone, of course, is talking about the upheaval in the world. And, I made a couple of notes before the program just about things that we've seen recently, and I'm sure that you've seen them too. But, I'm going to put out the things for me, I think, are that it's just been an incredible challenge trying to meet all of the changes that have been happening fast and furious. And I think that, our clients strive for consistency. Our clients are always striving to try to do something called predict the future. And they're always asking us to do that because as lawyers, that's our responsibility, is to try to give good, consistent, and predictable advice to our clients. The problem is with the way things have been going, it's been completely impossible because changes have been happening, like you said, on a daily basis. And they're not just small changes. I mean, they're dramatic changes. They're changes which not only affect, what we're doing today, but also have an impact on what we're going to be doing in the future. So setting up strategic plans. One day you could be giving advice in one direction, and then you could be going 180 degrees in a different direction. But number one, deeper vetting. So social media and deep vetting is something that we've seen that came out of an executive order that President Trump signed when he came into office. The use, and we've discussed this before, the use of government AI and algorithms to find violations. So that's on the enforcement side. There's been a big step up on the enforcement side in the US. And I think it's also because now this AI gives you the opportunity to have discussions between different administrative agencies. So before, administrative agencies used to silo. In other words, that they would say, these are our resources and no one else can have our resources. And they never shared. And now they're sharing. And maybe it's not a bad thing that they're sharing, but what it does is it opens the door to tremendous enforcement coming at folks from all different angles. We've noticed big delays, huge delays in the process, and that's also because of the deeper vetting, but it's also because if you're interviewing every single case, there's not enough people around to do those interviews. And so everything ends up getting backlogged, and that's very frustrating. And to say the least, the public nowadays that we're dealing with, and I'm sure you are too, is everybody wants everything done yesterday. Well, it's just not real. You can't do things that way. We also have seen a tremendous shift in the system, which has gone from a focus on intellect, because the United States has always been, if you look at pre-certified cases respect intellectuals and individuals who have really the 50-page resumes. And now the focus in the United States is on money. How much you got? Premium processing. That's one example. You can move your case through in 2 weeks if you're willing to pay the money. If you want a green card, pay the government. And investment visas, that seems to be the way to get visas quickly. So the process in the United States continues, of course, to be a political football, and that is very, very frustrating to our clients. And what our corporate clients are realizing is that, yeah, they can possibly get the talent they need, but they're going to have to pay heavily for that talent. So, Gagan, what's going on the Canadian side? Any of that stuff bleeding through from down here?
We are getting impacted every day, but let's hear how Leona would see the HR getting impacted as well. Over to you,
Yes,
Leona.
thank you for the question. And thank you, David, for the background for what's happening in the US. I feel like it must be chaos on a daily basis trying to sort through all of the changes happening. And I think for anybody who's trying to look for work, this must really be difficult for them as well. And I certainly empathize. We have challenges here as well. And what we're seeing here lately is that our economy is softening a little bit. And, so as the economy is softening a little bit, there are fewer opportunities that are available. And so there's more competition for those positions as well. Those sectors that typically have been open, particularly for people who are on student visas, in terms of retail or in terms of restaurants, those jobs are just not available to the same extent as they were in the past. So it's a real struggle. The other piece that we're seeing is that with AI coming into things, that there's more competition for entry level positions that are coming through. We're also hearing from a number of HR people is that the hiring process is becoming more difficult because of AI. The applicant is using AI as well. And so employers are having to get very creative in terms of how they're handling that interview process, really to try and separate what's been generated for them through ChatGPT or whatever application they're using to what they've actually done. So it's been very interesting. So it seems like there really is a little bit of a mismatch between what's available. We do have shortages in certain sectors, and if individuals have those skill sets, they should be well positioned. But the problem that some of these individuals are running into, particularly as foreign trained professionals, is they have credentials from their home country, but now they have to jump through hoops of fire, it feels, to go ahead and get those credentials recognized here. And so we have some frustration, and I'm hearing about this particularly from some medical professionals that are coming from the US and coming to Canada. That they're having some challenges. They can get their work visas fairly quickly, but moving the rest of the process along seems to take a little bit of time. So it seems as though there's a lot of instability. And, Gag, maybe you could pick up on that with what you see on the immigration side.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was making my notes because everything that you mentioned, David mentioned, we have so much to say from how the government and IRCC is taking these. And now, as David mentioned about high filing fee, the government wants more. On the US side, the government is increasing the filing fee more and more. On our side, our filing fee is very low. It's like I don't even think any applications would have a filing fee more than 300, 500, or maybe $1,000 for these spousal applications. And then that gives a misconception and a wrong perception to a applicant who thinks that why would I pay a lawyer a bigger amount of fee when the government is only charging me that low amount of fee. So they kind of balance it out whenever I'm advising my clients that there would be a legal fee and that could be about in this amount. They're not too happy, but the problem here is that they end up doing those applications themselves. They mess it up. They believe that they are doing the best possible way. Everything that they have asked, they provided. But then the applications slow down because of the incompleteness. And then they keep getting the applications back from IRCC. And I have so many of my clients who come back. They are ready to pay the same amount of fee, and have me review all the entire application, resubmit the application and the documents. So yes, it's misnomer and misinformation out there that paying a legal practitioner is not that great, although that would be the best advice. At least I would say that it's better you pay a professional and get your applications done professionally. And then on the how Leona, you mentioned about youth finding challenges in finding jobs, etc. How IRCC is coming along is that now, starting April 1st, 2026, they mentioned that any employer who's looking to employ and do an LMIA process must make bona fide efforts to employ youth and make sure the advertisements are a place where youth would be reaching out to those platforms. So that's something that now Service Canada wants to see these efforts made by the employer in finding the right candidate and not just getting the LMIA for that foreign national, but making a bona fide efforts to find a suitable Canadian citizen, permanent resident, or the youth in that area of the jobs and occupations. Another part is about AI. Yes, I agree that a lot of times it's the employer also using AI as well as the employee. For that, IRCC says that, okay, in your advertisement, you have to make sure that you inform the prospective candidates that AI is being used or will be used during the recruitment process. So that's more transparency out there. Another part is, yes, I also agree with the medical practitioners that Canada is asking more and more medical practitioners to come. And British Columbia is one such province where it has opened up a lot of opportunities for US doctors and nurses to come and practice in British Columbia. And they are eliminating third party steps where earlier these doctors and nurses would have to go through some third party, complete those steps, and then they would be employed as practitioners in this province. But now the colleges say that no, you come directly to us and we'll assess your education background and accordingly we'll be able to provide you with the equivalency to practice in British Columbia. So steps are being taken. We are, I would say we should be ready for these steps because Canada has had a very open border policy for the longest time. That's how everybody has seen Canada, that you just apply, you're invited, come with your entire family, and everything's okay. So that vision, or that's something what Canada had shown it to the world, is now definitely changing and shifting.
Huh. I have two things I'd like to probe you guys both on. Number one, actually, Leona, you gave me a great idea. If I don't make it in the law, I'm thinking about starting a training program called AI for the Aged. Maybe that's not a bad idea. I'm thinking that maybe starting training programs for folks, just on AI alone. And actually, it's interesting that you say that because when you talk to folks, who are I say our age, our contemporaries, and you talk about AI, there's a pause, and they're like they know they've talked about it and heard about it, but the fact that they've actually, gone in and used it is, I think, a whole nother, it's a whole nother ball game. Because what I usually say to people is I say, well, try it out because it's just like using Google. If you're comfortable with Google, you can use AI. It's just that everyone uses AI, and then there's this like mystery that's created about AI. And I think that we need to do something to dispel that mystery.
One of the
Cut.
individuals that I was speaking to recently who just landed a new position, early 60s, working in a high-level payroll processing type role. And I spoke with her about AI. And I said, "Have you looked into it?" She said, "Well, no." I said, "I think you should. Dive into it, take a look at where AI could help you with your job, where it couldn't." I always point out to everybody, don't be using AI for compliance matters because the information that it's drawing up is often not correct, at least in employment law. I'm assuming it might be the same on your side. And she went on and she took some AI courses. She went for her interview. The topic of AI came up and she was able to speak about it quite comfortably and landed the job. And so, this is where individuals are a little bit afraid of the technology, but to get in there, play with it, see how it actually impacts your particular profession or the area that you're going into. What are the limitations of it? What are the security issues around using AI? What should you be uploading? What shouldn't you be uploading? What happens with client privilege? That's come up recently in the US. These are all very important topics, but these are things that I think would help candidates at all ages. I think for individuals that are just starting their careers, they're very much technical nomads anyway. They're going to be all over it. But for other individuals that already have an established career, to really stop and spend the time to do that, I think will really help them land and help them demonstrate that they really are keeping up with things, particularly with larger companies where they're more likely to be making those investments into AI.
Well, I told my staff that you got to use Claude. I use Claude, and they thought I was involved in a same-sex relationship. But but I was quickly able to dispel that notion. But the thing, I'm just out of curiosity and taking off from what you said, what are the hot occupations right now north of the border? Like, I was reading over the weekend a little bit about, that healthcare down here is tremendous, booming. IT, tremendous and booming. What's going on north of the border? Like
Gagan,
That's
what?
why don't you
exactly the
take
one.
that?
Yeah, you stole the thunder. And that's the
Okay.
health workers, the IT professionals. And that's what more and more the provinces are encouraging. There are shorter routes for them to obtain work permits versus going through low wage, high wage LMIA if you are into one of these occupations. And that's what even Ontario is heading on to, that these are the most sought after occupations. But then from Leona's discussion, I'm just going to take it forward that if someone wants to come to Canada, what should they be prepared for? That's something, an important question that anybody would like to go over before making these big decisions, lifetime changes of coming and settling into a new country. What would you think, Leona? How should they be prepared?
And Leona, that's besides a winter coat.
The winter coat is essential. Yes. But once you've decided on the winter coat, you really have to decide, well, what's going to be the better place to land for you? You have the options. Maybe it's going to be Canada, maybe it's going to be the US. In speaking to the Canadian context, it's like, what part of Canada do you want to go to? And I think this applies to the US as well, because we want to be taking a look at labor vacancy rates. What are the skills to be offered? And which market specifically is going to have the most opportunities. The other side to it is there might be a lot of opportunities in some of the larger cities, but what about the housing cost and the cost of living and the fact that you have so much more competition? So that's the practical in terms of where will you hang up that winter coat once you arrive. But even before that, though, what will you end up doing with your certifications? And how easy will it be for you to transport those designations, everything else, the credentials that you have built where you have established your base? How easy will that be to transport to your new country? And how long will it take before you can actually be practicing? And it's very interesting when I speak with individuals around how long does it take to land. In some cases, people are landing very, very quickly. I worked with a client and we hired somebody. She had been in the country for 2 weeks. Her work permit was 2 weeks old. We had hired her for a full-time job because she had the skill sets that we were looking for. There are other individuals who languish for a long period of time and are very frustrated and very disappointed. So I think in terms of, where to go, it's also how easy will it be to establish the social networks? We understand that many people are going to go on to job boards to be looking for their opportunities. But in actual fact, I advise people to stay away from the job boards because you have all of this competition. And there are so many employers who do not use the job boards or who are struggling with overwhelm because they just don't have the capacity to be going through so many, applicants. And so that warm introduction, I know so and so, they've just landed. Do you need somebody? So many people are getting their first opportunity that way or are getting a foot in the door into some very, solid level positions for many people. It would be very difficult for them to land. So I think there's a lot of practical considerations people have to think about. How will they be able to relate to people? And I think also they need to be very honest with themselves around their communication skills, but also around their cultural awareness. There are some very different approaches that we take in different countries to a number of different things. And, to be able to be on the pulse for, what's considered common, here in the North American context in comparison to maybe the European or Middle Eastern context. This is important for people to be thinking about. And it's hard to think about what would it be like somewhere else because you're coming from an environment where everybody does the same thing. You don't know that there would be a different because you don't experience different. And I'm just referencing a situation I had when I was a teenager with my parents. We were camping. We were in Maine. Beautiful, beautiful place. And somebody was asking me about my accent, and I was thinking, my accent? I have an accent. You have an accent. But it just kind of goes to show that these are all things that we have to think about. So I'll pass that over.
Yeah, I agree with you, Leona. And what I always believe, and that's probably what I'm going to conclude, that it's totality of circumstances. It's not just one immigration aspect, or that you know any relatives, or you know an education that says that, okay, this would be a path for your immigration permanent residency. It's totality of your circumstances. And now, so I present at some of these groups where the students are there, mostly it's international students, and I always tell them that my advice to you is not to follow what the province has introduced these new programs. There could be provinces encouraging more and more rural immigration, and they would say, okay, come to our rural side of the land and do work permits and apply there and gain your experience out there. But that would not be the ideal way to proceed because you just don't know when those provinces will close down the programs. So imagine you spend about a year, 2 years thinking that you will finally qualify, and Bill C12 is right in front of our eyes, which says that they can close the programs at any time, whether it's work permit and whether it's the provinces who can take all those final decisions in closing and terminating programs with no uh, no, oh my God, my emails keep popping and they keep distracting me. I'm sorry for that. But yes, they don't want to give you a lot of time. And we see that in asylum cases, it says that, okay, retroactively from June 2020, if you had filed an asylum case and that was a year after your landing into Canada, sorry, you will not be referred to the IRB. If you did a unlawful or if you crossed the land borders between US and Canada, and you did not file your asylum past 14 days in Canada, you will not be eligible for any IRB hearing. So those are the things that we are hearing and how it's playing out. IRCC is getting tough on immigration. So coming back to the question, just don't think that, okay, you're going to come here, do your bachelor's and master's, and that would be a path for your PR. Maybe you want to get your degree, you want to gain experience and going back to home country and then still applying for different visa programs in Canada could be a potential or could be a smart way to play out your journey as a professional. So just don't think that you're going to pack your bags, come to Canada, and you are going to be permanent resident. That is not true anymore. We've seen that happening for the past many, many years. I came as an immigrant to Canada about 24 years back. And we've seen so many changes from then to now. It's not the same Canada we knew. It's playing out and making immigration more difficult. So
Yeah.
having a Canadian education, going to good colleges, universities, gaining that education experience and going back to home country is not a bad idea at all. Over to you, David. Your thoughts.
Yeah, so actually what I think inheres in what Leona and you, the message, I think the telegraphing that you guys are giving, although a little differently, I'm just going to hone it a little bit to say, I think it's about like what I tell my Spanish clients all the time is poco poco, which is slow, slow. It takes time. It's almost like, when people are coming to the United States, these non-immigrant categories are created to allow them to dip their toes into the water, to feel, is this a place where you want to be? to see what the market is like, and I think Leona said this best, is, get a flavor for the environment and then, of course, make the jump from there, which is the lawful permanent residence in the US. And it's interesting because it's almost like it's created, it's almost the immigration system in the US has morphed in such a way that it allows individuals to get a flavor for what the environment is like and how they're going to be potentially doing business, and then they can move. So we have individuals who come, for example, when they come from Canada, they come as visitors. So they're usually using like ESTA, or they're, maybe they have a B1, B2, which is a non-immigrant visa, which is good for 6 months. If they get a B1, which is that they're visiting for a foreign business, let's say they have an established business in Canada, they can get like a 1 year stay in the US. They usually attend trade shows, they get involved in the community. A lot of times, and I think, Leona, you touched on this a little bit, actually, you both touched on this, is that, again, especially Gagan, you're saying totality of the circumstances. If you have family, that's tremendously helpful because that family, especially a large family, is going to be able to make introductions and make you feel more comfortable doing business. And also, if you're close to family, you feel more comfortable. And so that enhances the ability to come and to stay and feel more comfortable. You are introduced to the appropriate resources. So that works well. And then they move, let's say, to an E2 or an investor visa, which again is a longer term type visa. It's good for 2 years. And so you can expand then your platform a little bit. And then you can start working on the green card. A lot of people think that when they come in on the E2, they can't go to a green card, which is not true. So you have to be careful about what you hear on the internet and stuff. But, we then move them to the green card. And, so it's almost like this very slow process where they, again, are able to dip their toes in the water, slowly move into the into the pool, right? And so it's kind of interesting that it's designed that way. But I think you're absolutely right. There's so many different factors that would allow an individual to make a determination as to whether or not they want to come. And it's, again, same thing for going to Canada as it is to come to the United States. And I think that, and you and I, of course, have realized that there's a mutually symbiotic relationship between Canada and the United States, such that, when things maybe are down in the US, people are going to Canada, like we saw last year with the H-1Bs, that, folks went up to Canada. And, so it's almost like this very delicate balance that goes on between, the north of the border and south of the border. And that's a good thing too, I suppose. But
Yeah, I agree.
very
So
good for
we had
trade.
this, yeah, we had this coming back to the provinces to settle. So it was very popular back in the days when they said, okay, in Canada it's MTV, and MTV stands for Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. Those are the only cities people knew that they're going to come and settle. And that's when a few years ago when I started saying, no, there are new programs in Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia, where is that? In Saskatchewan. How do you even pronounce that? And then that's how these new provinces started coming out and saying that, okay, come be in our province, and these are new programs that we encourage you to participate, and that could potentially be a path of permanent residency. But yes, there are programs. Sometimes I feel that that's just my thought, that US has more clear pathways, been there rock solid for many years. Like H1B, you will make those changes with wages or how they are going to now determine who to take in H1Bs. In Canada, I see there's a lot of uncertainties. You go through, you file a low wage LMIA, and suddenly it's paused for 2 years. There was similar to EB5, we had a startup visa program. Too much of fraud happened and the government closed it down. I don't know, it's closed or it's paused, but at least for a couple of years, we are not going to see SUVs around. There are good programs like self-entrepreneurial work permit. I've always been advising my clients that rather than investing into someone else projects, why don't you invest in your own business? And we've done it successfully. We've had this self-entrepreneurial work permit, although you don't gain any experience, but at least you know that you'll be able to make your money in good use. And then we, of course, have other programs that come and go. But I feel US has very solid programs and clearly laid out versus our programs, which are always ready to change, other than those trade agreements that we have with a lot of European countries, and about 36 countries we have trade agreements, and a lot of professionals from those countries can come and work in Canada. What do you think, Leona?
So it's, for individuals, they have tough decisions to make when they're trying to decide where they're going to go. And, I think also one of the criteria that we haven't really talked about is the difference between Canada and US in terms of the sizes of the companies. Canada, we have primarily small companies.
Smaller.
In Canada, a large company has over 500 employees. In the US, 500 and less is considered a small employer. So, just in terms of the scales of opportunities available, that's an important criteria for people to be considering. So, one of the pieces of advice that I've given to individuals on their resumes is, if it's a kind of company that nobody would have heard of here, then you need to maybe say, well, what's the industry sector? And, what was the size of the business? So at least we have a sense of the scale. And, I don't know if that comes up in the US context, but certainly in the Canadian context, that's something that's there. And, clearly people will have to pivot their expectations to the fact that we have smaller companies and there's less of them than perhaps their home country. So by default, there might not be the opportunities that people are looking for at their particular level, even if they're looking at some of these smaller rural communities, or they want to go, for instance, to Nova Scotia, the Atlantic Canada. The markets there are very different than what they are in the province of Ontario. And this would apply across the US as well. Some states are far more robust and far more built out for whatever reason than others are. And that these are all factors people have to consider. And I don't think that that degree of nuance is really top of mind for many people when I'm speaking to them.
I
Excellent.
think Leona also, yeah, I was just going to say, Leona, I think it's also kind of interesting. I'm just thinking as you're speaking about the difference in the size of the companies. I think that one factor that's tremendously helpful for Canadian businesses being smaller is also that more easily able to pivot and to move depending upon what the political climate might be. And it also is probably one of the reasons why entrepreneurialism is really, is prominent among Canadians. I find the Canadians that come to the United States are tremendously entrepreneurial. And I really respect that. Those are the folks again who are coming as investors and building, they come with very small businesses and they build that business. And they usually scale at about probably anywhere between, let's say, 10 to 50 employees in the United States, which oftentimes are subsidiaries and linked to companies in Canada, which may also be linked to companies in Europe. It's kind of interesting. But I tend to find that that type of an environment breeds this, this I will say, old school entrepreneurial spirit that, we unfortunately, I seem, and maybe I'll be called on this, we sort of lack lately in the United States. Again, I sort of marvel at my Canadian clients who come to the US and bring that old school entrepreneurial spirit here.
And now let's just conclude. I know we have so much to share, but I was wondering, let's just conclude. What are your final thoughts if someone wants to come to Canada or to the US? What should they be prepared for? Leona.
I think they really need to be considering how things might be the same, how things might be different from the environment that they came from, and to really think about the importance of the networking and of the credentials so that they really can have that soft landing. As I said, I've had experiences with individuals where they've come, they've barely unpacked their suitcases and they're off and running. They have their employment, they're good to go. When I speak with individuals, it's sometimes luck and timing. They've worked with the recruiter, they have an employer who's open to that and will move very quickly, or it's been around the networking. So I really can't state that enough. The importance of the networking once you land, or preferably before you land, just to set the table, as it were, and give yourself a good head start. The opportunities are there. No question, entrepreneurialism is alive and well. in Canada. I was actually looking at some research, and it's no surprise that immigrants coming to Canada are sort of the prime drivers of creating businesses. And I know in my own practice, many of my clients are individuals who have come from another country. They struggled a little bit once they got here. Once they've set up their own companies, they really do make it a point to try and find people from within their own community if they can to help them out. But it's not that they're just limiting it to that by any means. But this business of, go ahead and create a business for yourself, find your own market, it's very much encouraged. And I think that's a brilliant pathway as well.
Thank you, Leona. How about you, David?
That's great. Actually, taking off from what Leona's saying is that entrepreneurs tend to take the plunge. It's counterintuitive for them to do poco poco or to dip their feet in the water. Entrepreneurs go to the edge of the cliff, they look down, and then they jump. And that's just, unfortunately, that's the entrepreneurial spirit. But sometimes not a bad thing. I think that if you're going to be doing a move like this, I think that you need to have a good network in place. And what I usually tell clients if they're thinking about making the move, taking the leap, is you have to have a good team. The team should be a good lawyer, a good accountant, a good insurance broker, and a good person who is an overall consultant who can advise on getting themselves a platform on the ground for human resources, because there is so much within that human resources world that is so mysterious. Getting a payroll set up, hiring people, knowing where the resources are to do the managerial type stuff that needs to get set up, and also, which is a function and a part of what you do on a daily basis, and you alluded to this before, which I thought was really great, is understanding diverse cultures, especially here in the United States. As much as our present administration will not admit to it, it is a melting pot. And Canada is also a melting pot. And it's a little different. It's a different melting pot, but it's a great place, again, to set down. It's a great place to set down your platform and to expand on that platform. What do you think?
And for me, I would say my number one to the zillion advice that I would give is that for anybody who's looking to move to Canada, any international student or a work permit holder who's looking to apply for any work permits, etc., please, please, please do not fall for any misinformation. Go for the right guidance. There are numerous fraudulent activities that are happening in Canada, for which we are seeing how the government is taking strong steps to stop those misuse of immigration programs. We have fantastic immigration programs, but just because of their misuse, misinformation that's been spread out, that's by these ghost agents, etc., that's what is harming those genuine bona fide immigrants who are looking to come and make a life out here, because Canada is looking to have more and more immigrants who are able to contribute to the economy. And that's one we see under the express entry. We see now there's a category for managers and executives. Just because managers and executives would reach at certain age, that they cannot benefit for under the express entry. But Canada did make those conscious steps so that they could be retained by Canada and could take benefit of their expertise. And second, if anybody says that there is a guarantee for any kind of an immigration path to become a permanent resident, please leave right away. Please leave right away. Take that information or do your own search and search it up on the government websites. Do not search it up on AI, chat GPTs, however friendly these websites are, but not for the immigration path that they are going to tell you. So go for a good advice. And of course, as David mentioned, it looks like to me as a wedding planner, you should have one who, and that's a big team, that you should have an accountant, a lawyer, and someone who's able to guide you through correctly. So if you have any questions, you have all our information. Feel free to reach out to us. And thank you so much, Leona. Thank you, David, for all that wisdom, all the advices. It's such a pleasure being part of this group and to share with our listeners what could be the potential path and how you could navigate your steps to Canada or US. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Gaga.
Thank you.